The news just keeps on coming for the Boston Celtics around the trade deadline as a new report states that the Celtics are not done and will probably be aggressively pursuing another trade. We got to talk about that, plus the truth behind the Xavier Tillman trade and why it might just be a steal for the Celtics. That plus much more on this trade deadline episode of Celtics Digest. But before we get into the video, a reminder that 78% of you people watching are not subscribed. That is thousands of you every single video. And if you like the daily Celtics content, all the trade deadline stuff, heading into the playoffs, everything, this is your spot. Fellas, Bruce, Isaac, we got some stuff to talk about, and, we were shocked by this Tillman trade, and if you guys haven't looked at the Tillman trade, we got a video that went up earlier, go check it out. Shout out to you, Bruce, but there's more stuff coming. According to NBA Central, the Dunk Central, and according to Brian Robb, Brad Stevens and the Celtics are anticipated to continue their aggressive approach and make another move before the trade deadline tomorrow. Now, I know we're of different minds about whether they should or whether we think they actually will do this. I think that going for another big man maybe could help, maybe some more wing depth. I don't know. What do you fellas think?
I think possibly they could go after some wing depth, like they've mentioned. They've always wanted a big-time wing. That's been the rumor that Brad Stevens has kind of mentioned this whole offseason going into the trade deadline. So possibly a big-time wing. But going after a guy like Xavier Tillman, I don't know if the big man, we have a loaded front court now, possibly going after a guard and there's been some rumored guards that we can get into as well later in the video that have been mentioned in the past couple of days that the Celtics could also pursue as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a little on the devil's advocate side, and I'm leaning toward. I know everyone's saying Brad should go keep make some more moves. I think you got to keep the championship roster going. I really truly think this roster at its core is solid, and the Xavier Tillman piece was a financial business decision that if it works out, great. If it doesn't, we can let him walk and we can grab somebody else in free agency. Now, maybe that's just me being over cocky, little overzealous, but I think they did the business aspect part of what they need to do on the trade deadline. Unless you're going after like someone that can play 3 and D, that can play the 4 and the wing at that big man slot, and also that wing spot that can do both. It's like, hey, we can post up a little bit. He's not just a one-dimensional wing. I'd stop. I would stop if I was Celtics.
I don't mind that take. It's actually really interesting. So I'm going to play devil's advocate to your devil's advocate. And there's actually an interesting name that you just made me think of that we'll talk about later. But just right now, I kind of like your idea, actually. Again, it's like, yeah, this is the squad. You don't want to change too much. It's clearly working, right? Like you don't need, yeah, you can get all the insurance you want, but this is a team that's been winning. My only concern at this point really is the wing depth. And it's like, what is the Sam Hauser insurance? Like, what if he goes down with an injury? What if one of the Jays has to miss a game or something? And it's like, I feel like, especially with Lamar Stevens being sent to Memphis in this trade, you say like Brissett, but it's like, where do you really go after Sam Hauser if maybe he can't for some reason play a lot of minutes or something else happens? I feel like filling that spot might be a decent idea if they can fit a good player into that Grant Williams traded player exception.
That's interesting that you brought that up. And that's where I look at, like, I would try to save your trade assets if I'm the Celtics. Truly, I know probably our viewers are looking at me like, oh, he's the G League guy. He really likes in-house development. Maybe that's just like the baseball fan in me. And I'm sorry to our YouTube, to our fans and our viewers that watch our videos. I'm about development. I love development. The Celtics have one of the best G League organizations in the league, next to our division competitors, the Knicks. We have great guys that we've drafted well. We have Jordan Walsh. We have other guys too that we can potentially move up that are be cheaper, one, and easier that we can already control. But then again, I like a little sexy superstar names too. So you can't have your cake and eat it too. So obviously there's got to be a choice made.
What do you think, Bruce?
I personally think that going after a wing would definitely help out this team, like you mentioned, Josh. But kind of what Isaac's saying as well, the Celtics do have a very solid G League team. I've noticed over the past couple years, like going back to like 2016, 2017, that this team was, always had solid pieces, even guys that were overseas and stuff like that. Maybe they never really panned out in the NBA. That's why we've kind of only seen, Sam Hauser and Luke Kornet for like his little bit of stints playing down with the G League be like the only promising guys coming out. But like Isaac mentioned, there are some guys in there, even some, young guys that are just undervalued and just not really like NBA grown names that could grow and be guys. But also with this championship team going for that ring and wanting to be a championship pedigree team, having that availability of the Grant Williams traded player exception, if we don't use it, I view it kind of as a waste.
Yeah, that's also a good point because it's like you want that championship pedigree and you want these vets who give insurance. And yeah, like Jordan Walsh, maybe if you put him in the right situation, he could thrive. Like, I don't know, maybe another G League name is JD Davison, but I don't see him making a true impact, right, if he comes up tomorrow. But we'll have to just wait and see. But yeah, there's a ton of stuff. Like, we'll get into some more names later on in the video, so stick around for that. But leave a name down below. Before we get into that, I want to hear what you guys think, who the Celtics should go after before we talk about some other names, before any other trades happen. We'd love to hear from you. But there was a big trade, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the Xavier Tillman trade. And we got some truth behind it. Now, a lot of fans are saying this is kind of the perfect trade for the Celtics. And then there's people like me who are saying, well, he's one of the worst offensive players in the NBA this year, though he is, according to some defensive stats, in the 99th percentile. I believe it's EPM that ranked him in the 99th percentile of defenders for his position. But we got some interesting stuff to go through here with Tillman. So, according to Bobby Marks, Tillman's on an expiring $1.9 million contract. Well, that's just a fact. That's not Bobby Marks saying it. That's a fact. We know that. His salary will go into the Justin Jackson traded player exception. The Celtics will inherit his bird rights and can sign him in the offseason despite their financial limitations. Boston has 8 seconds available before the trade. Of course, that also ended up with Lamar Stevens heading down to Memphis. But the fact that this fits into the Justin Jackson trade exception and the Grant Williams trade exception is still openly available, you got to think that was planned, right? I know you can't combine player exceptions, but you certainly can use one for one player, one for another. And also the fact that they get his bird rights, that's not something negotiated in the trade. That's just the nature of how trading contracts works. That can also be big because like we were kind of talking about, you get Tillman, like you said, Isaac, it's kind of a good financial decision, or one of you two. I don't remember actually at this point. I think it might have been you. But like you get him, and then if he works out and plays some of the best defense you've seen on this team, you keep him and you can go over the cap a bit to sign him. He's not going to be super expensive. And you still keep the Grant Williams traded player exception. I feel like this is just a complete masterclass of a trade, even if his offensive upside isn't really there.
I totally agree with you, Josh, on that as well. I think bringing in Xavier Tillman kind of helps out the Boston Celtics, kind of with their front court depth, as we've seen, Namus Keita getting some run, Luke Kornet getting some run. But I think Xavier Tillman's more of like an NBA-ready guy on the defensive side and can kind of fit in. And like you mentioned, it's also a cheap expiring deal, and the Celtics have the bird rights on him. So if the Celtics next season, if he plays well with the Celtics team on the defensive side of the ball and possibly can get better on the offensive side of the ball, playing with, great offensive creators and Al Horford and Kristaps Porzingis, kind of developing a little bit of a better three-point shot and finishing around the rim, we could get possibly one of the biggest steals at the trade deadline here with the Boston Celtics bringing him in, signing him into an extension. Obviously, it won't affect the cap for the long term as we have the bird rights, so we'll be fine. And then going into next season, if you want to look at the front court depth, kind of talking about it, maybe in hindsight, this might be a little bit too early, but talking about it in the future, we could have Al Horford, Kristaps Porzingis, you could have Luke Kornet back. You could have Xavier Tillman, Jordan Walsh coming up from the G League, and Namus Keita from that two-way, possibly being a key piece on that rotation roster. I think that, deep six is solid for the Celtics. Then they just have to worry about that wing position and that guard position a little bit as well.
Yeah, no, and Bruce, you brought up some great points with the Tillman trade. I personally think it was a great business transaction because you get to save some money on the way and sign other pieces later along the way. But like I said, it all depends on what the Celtics and what their mindset is right now. Are they a win now situation? Like this is our only opportunity to win the chip, or hey, we have a couple other championship windows that we could get. I personally think they have a couple other championship windows that they can go get after. Jayson Tatum is still very young. Jaylen Brown is still very young. Derrick White is still very young, all early in their careers. I get it with Jrue Holiday and Al Horford. You maybe want to just give them a service and get them a ring, but I think the Celtics still have a little more room, and especially with the way the NBA will be shaping in the next couple of years, some teams are not gonna be where they're gonna be in the future in the long haul. But I know a lot of people like to think of the present. I like to think long term.
But you know what I think is interesting about the Tillman trade is that it kind of feels like a weird combination of a win now and a long-term thing, where that Xavier Tillman fills a need that the Celtics have, right? Like Al Horford, the last thing you want is for him to be extremely, relied upon defensively, while also you still want him to go out there, be playoff Al, hit some threes, this kind of stuff. Like if you can take a bit of the load off him, that's the perfect thing that Tillman can do, right? He's that big physical body. He's built a lot like Grant Williams in a lot of ways, right? The guy who we're talking about is traded player exception here. Like Tillman can come in and play that defense this season to alleviate some of Al Horford's load, but also can do it next season or whenever you need him to, because you have his bird rights and he's not that expensive this season. So I feel like it's just a nice little combo move. It's like low risk. You trade away a couple seconds in Stevens, and you get a guy who could potentially be a game-changing defender for you. Maybe not 30 minutes a night game-changing defender, but someone who can play spot minutes and be that elite level defender you want to alleviate some of your other guys, but also like that same guy could be part of this, championship window for the next 3 or 4 years.
For sure. And kind of to bounce off your point off of that, Josh, real quick. I know you were talking about Al Horford, being a really good offensive threat, but defensive threat, and having Xavier Tillman helps that out. We've seen with Al Horford this season, at the beginning of the year, his shot wasn't really falling for the Boston Celtics, but on the last couple of months, he's actually started to get in a bit of a groove and helping out being a rim protector as well. But this will definitely, alleviate some of the work and stress that he has to deal with being that front court presence, especially, coming off back-to-backs where he has to deal with rest and stuff. This will help the Boston Celtics in the long term. We've seen, with Luke Kornet go down and Kristaps Porzingis nurturing some injuries, the Celtics have had to have Luke Kornet, Namus Keita, Oshae Brissett, Lamar Stevens, who got dealt, play massive minutes. We saw Lamar Stevens have his best game playing as the starting center for the Boston Celtics when they were completely obliterated with injuries in their front court versus Orlando. So that's the type of thing that we get here, is that depth to just help out and ensure this team for this season and helping them get into a little bit of a stride. And with Lamar Stevens as well, like going to Memphis, I think it's good for him a little bit to kind of bounce on that, just because, Memphis has these injuries. They've been battered up. If he goes and stays in Memphis, he can be, a piece for them to kind of, rebuild and kind of help out, but also get some playing time, because he didn't really get that on the Boston Celtics. He was one of those guys kind of shafted at the bottom, even behind Oshae Brissett at some points. I feel like he wasn't really valued a lot on the Celtics roster because he was a 13th or 14th man.
Decent 3-point shooter. Like, I think Lamar Stevens is decent upside, reunited with Marcus Smart. But yeah, there's a lot of implications from this trade. I'm very glad the Celtics did it. But again, like we said, they're not done. So we're going to transition a bit to some other targets. And there's a lot of rumors out there. We got a lot of players that we need to talk about. Look, we know that the Grant Williams traded player exceptions was $6.9 million. There's a lot of stuff you can go for. And there have been rumors circulating about everything from big men to wings. But the first thing we got to talk about is, according to Mark Stein, Sixers have indeed registered interest in Andre Drummond joining the likes of Boston and Dallas. Now, we may have another video coming out very soon about Andre Drummond and the links to the Celtics. Let's talk about that first, before we get into some of the wings. I know we want to talk a bit more about the wing depth, I think, than the big man depth at this point, but just to talk about Drummond and maybe even a guy like Mike Muscala, who is also an option, a $3.5 million expiring deal, former Celtic, and he's a great shooter, and the Celtics know him. I'll toss this one to you, Isaac. Like, if you had to get another big man, if it's true that the Celtics are interested in Drummond, and this wasn't just before the Tillman trade maybe, and maybe they still have interest, would you go for a guy like Drummond? Would you maybe go for a guy like Muscala? Or are we kind of in agreement that, like, maybe another big man is not the solution at this point?
At this point, another big man is not the solution, but because Andre Drummond is in the question, I'd say why not?
Yeah.
I know you, me, Josh talked about this early in the season. Drummond would be a great piece. He'd be like a luxury to have, almost like, almost like a bonus. But do you essentially need him? No, because my thing is Drummond's going to also getting to that point. He's also getting a little older too. He's getting cheaper, but he's also getting a little older too. And then you end up in a little Al Horford situation. He's still productive, older, but cheaper contract. And you're kind of figuring out like, okay, we want to go younger, but we don't have any of the best options to go younger just yet. So, we got Keita. We're good. I think we're good. I think we should just stay where we're at. But once again, I wouldn't mind entertaining Drummond because it's Andre Drummond. You know what he's going to do for you. He's going to be serviceable. He's a great big man for what he's done. He's throughout his full career. And plus, I don't think he wants to be in that Bulls situation, given that they're still trying to decide whether they're going to rebuild, especially with the news of Zach LaVine out for the rest of the year. I don't think it's anything you want to be part of if I was Andre Drummond. So at this point in the stage of his career, so I would pursue, but window shop at it in pursuit.
I'd agree with Isaac on that as well. I definitely window shop and look to see if he was available. I think that if we didn't make this Tillman move, I think he would have been a guy that I would have had a little higher up on my list because I really like the quality of rebounding he brings. Offensive rebounding is one of the Celtics' biggest struggles. We let up a lot of second chance points. He helps out on that. And we saw last night versus the Timberwolves versus Gobert and Karl-Anthony Towns putting up 16 rebounds. So a solid, effective rebounder as well. But like you guys mentioned, both of you, since we went after a guy in Xavier Tillman, I think the front court is a little too clogged up right now, and Drummond will find himself on another contender for sure.
Yeah, I think so too. I love the idea of Muscala too. Just give him a shout out. We all love Mike, right? Greatest of
Oh
all
yeah,
time.
for
We
sure.
love Mike. But yeah, no, I think you guys are right. I think I'm on the same page. Like, you don't need it. And we all love Neemias Queta too, and I think a lot of the fans love him. Now, whether the coaching staff would trust him over Drummond in the playoff situation, well, that's maybe a different story. But I don't think that's a decision they'll have to make. So, I think that's it for the big men. So let's transition a bit to the wings, and this is just a list of a few that I found from a list of 25 potential trade targets. For the likes of Alexander Walker, I don't think they'll get him, but the rest of the names are kind of interesting to me. You look at Otto Porter Jr. on the Raptors. This dude has the experience, right? When he's been healthy, he has really made some solid impacts throughout his career, but he hasn't played a game since December, and he'll probably land on a new team, and it could be the Celtics. Now, it's $6.3 million, but again, it's expiring and fit into the exception. You have also the likes of Saddiq Bey, who we have talked about quite a bit, former 50-point scorer in a game. I think he could be that exact insurance that we're looking for. Of course, Kenrich Williams as well. Maybe the Thunder won't give him up. I don't know. Out of those names, or even out of any name in the NBA, who are you guys thinking? Like, I'll toss this to you first, Bruce. But for me, if I'm looking at this list, like, I keep hearing Bay, and like when I first heard it, I was like, meh. But the more I hear it, I'm like, oh, like he's not bad. And now I'm thinking like, just having him on your bench, I feel like it could just be a real luxury, and I'm quite interested to see like if the Celtics could get him for a very reasonable price and what he could bring to a championship caliber roster.
I agree with you on that with that point too, Josh. I think Bay could be that X factor bench wing piece that you were talking about that could be a replacement for like Sam Hauser if he goes down, as he kind of shares a little bit of similar qualities, a little bit of a 3-and-D big, stretches out, a little bit inefficient at the 3-point shooting this season. But Atlanta, with a bunch of shot chuckers and Trae Young and all those guys going around just firing the ball right when they touch it, it's a little, you got to take that a little bit with a grain of salt. You expect with the Celtics, less a role, more consistent shots. He's going to be hitting them more in a more effective way as well. Also, a thing that I want to talk about as well is the Hawks. When they traded for Saddiq Bey, they traded him for a bunch of second-round picks from the Detroit Pistons. It was seeming that the Pistons didn't want to keep him for their future. And with the Hawks, amid all their trade rumors with DeJounte Murray, Clint Capella, Bojan Bogdanovic, all this mess, I could see a guy like Saddiq Bey, not a guy that they would want to keep on their books for the long term, especially if, he's going to be commanding some money going to free agency with them being near the luxury tax and stuff. So I think he could be a perfect, goes on the team, has an impact, and then next year moves on to a new team and gets a new deal. But that's okay because the Celtics win a chip.
Yeah, what do you think, Isaac? Who do you got?
I'm a big fan. I feel a little biased, and sorry to the viewers I'm a little biased. I'm from the same area where Saddiq Bey is from. I'm a DMV guy. I know Saddiq. We've met, and I'm a fan of his. We competed against each other in high school, so I would love to see the Celtics sign Saddiq. It'd be a great piece. It'd be a great wing piece. He's that insurance. He's someone that that's gonna he despite his down year, what you're gonna get from him. Hard-nosed wing that can play both ways and can get the job done for what you need them to do. Problem is, he's going to be expensive. Whether we like it or not, he's going to be expensive whenever we're at, which is why the Pistons trade him. He's going to be expensive, which is why the Hawks are going to trade him, because he's going to be expensive. So my thing is, are you guys willing to pay the price? Is the Celtics willing to pay the price for the future later on with him when they could sign somebody else or draft somebody else or get someone cheaper like Otto Porter Jr., who will be eventually going into his later years of his career and a more experienced vet? But I mean, that'd be a secret, sneaky like signing that I support, not only just as a Saddiq Bey fan, from someone who competed against him in our youth basketball days and high school days and from the DMV. I'd love to see him do work in the Celtics. I think he fits, but it's just about timing, and I don't think timing's there right now for him there. But he's one that like kind of brings up my name.
I like it. I mean, as you guys know too, we love sneaky trades here at Celtics Digest. But like, yeah, Saddiq, I think could really make an impact. I think we all really like him. I'm not that surprised that all three of us are kind of like, yeah, he might be the guy. But just before we end the video, real quick, let's just transition. I wanted to mention Otto Porter Jr. too, because this guy has been on some winning teams, right? This guy has been around the league. At one point, was signed to one of the bigger contracts that was available at the time when he was with the Wizards, heading to the Bulls. He's played on the Raptors and the Warriors. He's been all around. He knows how to win. And he's a kind of very solid, kind of what you said at the beginning of the episode, Isaac. Like he's kind of a wing who can play the 4, but he's more of a 4 that kind of started as a 3. He's a big guy, got long arms. He can play defense. He can hit the 3 ball. Just a quick note from each of you before we end this video. If we got Otto Porter, would you be pretty thrilled with that? Because I think that's just the kind of guy, if he can come back healthy and actually play like 15 minutes a night, I just think that's kind of the perfect fit as well alongside the Celtics bench.
I'm a little 50-50 on Otto Porter, like you mentioned. Think he'd be a great piece, but his injury history in the past couple of years has me a little dwindled down. But last year with the trade deadline, we saw them get Muscala, which was like a kind of utility tool player, which I could see Porter Jr. being for the Celtics. So with them getting an impact player in Xavier Tillman, maybe going for another utility guy in Porter Jr. is the right move.
It doesn't push the needle right away for me because he's injured. And availability is one of the biggest things right now with the NBA. Obviously, we've seen like a lot of guys are running out of their PTO with the 65-day max for the awards. But with Otto Porter's injury history, he doesn't move the needle. Now, if he was healthy and putting up even just a little bit of decent numbers, even better numbers than Tillman, just slightly better, yeah, I would say it'd be a great bonus. But once again, he's getting his later years of his career. I think you can get someone younger. And a little more efficient and someone that you can keep long term after rather than like a 1 year, 2 year rental.
Yeah, I agree with it. You know, the best ability is availability. And when you look at Otto Porter Jr., he's just not there right now. And how do you even gauge his trade value? It's really tough. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of possibilities. And we'd love to hear from you guys down below. Who do you think the Celtics should go after? Are they going to make another move? Seems like they might, but maybe they won't. Who knows? We'd love to hear from you. But that's going to do it for this trade deadline special edition of Celtics Digest. If you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, subscribe. The 75% of you people who are not subscribed, hit the button. Did you enjoy that video? If you did, hit it down below. I'm Josh Gosse. For my co-hosts, Bruce and Isaac, catch you in the next one.